Okay, microphone disaster averted. I am so happy to welcome Torsten Schoeneberg tonight. Torsten is one of our fabulous volunteers, and he has been helping Planet Earth Poetry out for a long time, and he's also an amazing host. So I'm really glad that he finally gets a chance to read his poetry at length. Born and raised in Germany, Torsten published short stories there before immigrating to Victoria in 2016, where he published poems in local publications such as Oratorealis. How do I not know that journal? How do I say it?
It has gone.
Oratorealis?
Oratorealis.
Oratorealis. Wow, cool. His current work in progress includes reviews of fictional books. His real book, Brenda Craigdarroch Doesn't Care If You Read This Book, was published in late 2020. We have to read the one with the washing machine clearly because that's what Torsten's daughter likes. This is a collection of 21 prose poems around a quirky character called Brenda, and it's gained a cult following. And Torsten's writing combines trends of current European literature with a distinct Canadian West Coast feel. And Torsten, I just said Torsten's already one of our fabulous alternate hosts. I think that's about it for you, isn't it? Have I done enough? I've done my dash. Welcome, Torsten.
Can you hear me all right with this? This is not about you. This is not the news. This is maybe about the sound of a horsefly, more so about the sudden sensation of stinging nettle and the rattle of southbound trains. This is not about you. This is not made to use. Maybe it's about a secret consignment. It's about the moment the flight curve bends down. It's about rainy days in Arcadia and the pouring and pouring of concrete. At best, it's about a shrubbery shivering in moonlight and a dragonfly munching its prey. This is not about you. This is not the final version. This might be about a knight move in a chess game. It's about a missing apostrophe and a missing child, the middle one, about the gap in every explanation. This is not about you. It once was about a courtyard at dusk with pigeons and smoke from the chimneys. Why? It will be about a drop of water on plastic or something other. Space is just time with more directions and with more birds in it. For an instant, it's about the dandelion whose parachutes turn to wet white arrows in rain. This is not about you. This is not about. This is with. This is for. This is from. This is this. Good to see you all. I do take some responsibility for the average age here being a little lower than, no offense, it usually is. Not so much for some of my students who showed up, and some of them even read some wonderful poetry here, for which I take no responsibility at all. I only teach them math. But also the average age gets lowered by my daughter, certainly the youngest person in the audience here, who just had her first public reading this Wednesday. She went to her old preschool and read them a little story that was really nice. And she admitted the night before she had stage fright. And I said, we all have stage fright. That's part of it. Okay. I brought this book and you can buy it for only $20. And as Kieran said, this got published in 2020. Remember when the lockdown was and nobody went anywhere and I couldn't do a big launch party or anything. So that was a bit sad, but the book has been around and it's called Brenda Craigdarroch Doesn't Care If You Read This Book. I care, I'm the author, but she's a bit of a character. She doesn't care about that. So I'm going to read one of these. I call them rhythmic stories. So they're prose poems. I can pass them as stories. If there's a story open mic, I can pass them as poems when there's a poem open mic. I'll read one to you. Yes, what is it, Helen? No, sorry, Helen, I will not read the one with the dishwasher. Maybe after. I know it's your favorite. I know it's your favorite. But actually, two things in the open mic gave me a cue about another one that I wanted to read. I just have to find it. Oh my. Okay, sorry about that. There it is on page 87, of course. Brenda Craigdarroch felt it when she saw her toothpaste spit disappear with the cold water in the sink. She felt it when she heard the fridge go to sleep. She felt it when she noticed the phone blinking at night. She felt it when someone talked over the end credits of a movie. She felt it when she saw printers and dog sheds on sale and tarps over cars. She felt it once at an intersection when she tried to see a raven or just a crow landing on a tree in the distance, but could not see it right because the traffic lights and the electricity lines were in the way, and she was distracted by a good-looking guy in the car next to her. There had been a time when she felt it when she saw Halloween or Christmas decorations in front yards, but that had passed. There were too many of those, and she did not feel it or anything else anymore when she saw them. It was not that something was wrong, that you are angry and want to do something like in politics, or that you are sad and blame someone like in history. It was not even that something was wrong, rather something was off. It's like you're close to knowing something, but then something is in the way. Brenda thought, it's like there's an obstacle which from one side looks like a signpost. But that's not quite it. Brenda thought, it's like a revelation that you have no revelation. But that's not quite it. One time she felt it when she looked out of a bus and spotted that in one window in one of the 60 or so houses that the bus passed on that street, somebody had put up a picture of a lighthouse. And she wondered why anyone would put up a picture of a lighthouse in their window, facing outwards for whomever to see. Brenda felt it when she found bread in the cupboard that had turned into rock. And she felt it one night when she walked home alone from a party, slightly intoxicated, and by chance passed by her old high school and saw that part of the building had been replaced, renovated, and all of it had been painted in different colors. She felt it strongly then. The only person she ever confided in about feeling it was her father. She somehow suspected that he felt something similar, and at her next visit, she tried to describe it. And she saw he was welcoming that. And she got more confident and opened up about it. And then he said that he's not entirely sure if it's the exact same thing, but yes, he had felt it strongly in his younger years, actually. Then for some decades, he said he had not felt it. That was when we had you and while you grew up, Brenda, he said. But he felt it again later and now feels it quite often, ever since he lived alone, he said. And Brenda asked, how would you describe it? And her father said, well, at first I would say it's like seeing a seagull when you expect an eagle. But that's not quite it. That's definitely not it. But one can start from there and try to refine it because it's not quite it. If somebody asked you, did you really expect an eagle? You'd have to honestly say, no, I had not actually expected an eagle. Rather, only after I saw the seagull afterwards, in hindsight, part of me thinks that I should have expected an eagle. But that's still not exactly it. And Brenda said, that's close, but it's not it. And they looked at each other. And they both felt it right then, together. And I'll finish off with one short poem and then I'll leave you to David. David and I have the plan to go out for drinks afterwards. And if you buy a book of his and a book of mine, then I can buy him a drink. He can buy me a drink. And you get 2 books. It's a win-win-win situation. All right? So that's what you want to do once David is done with his reading. This last thing, it needs a tiny introduction. It's a short poem. It's a tiny introduction. Last year, I turned 40 in October. And last year in February, I thought, here's one thing I do before I turn 40. I read Immanuel Kant's Kritik der reinen Vernunft, the critique of pure reason, which I had on my shelf for 20 plus years. And I'm so proud I did it. I started in February, I finished in September. I don't fully understand it. Nobody does, right? But that inspired this little piece that I wrote last March when I was in the middle. You all know that, right? There's this difficult chapter about the transcendental deduction of concepts of pure understanding with a schematism, right? That's like, yeah. By the way, it's of no help to be able to read it in the original German. Nothing. They say there is a scheme. A scheme is the faculty by which sensual data becomes experience, becomes recognition. It somehow has to do with the unit of apperception and time, Kant says. A red sock under a bed is experience only because it has been put through a scheme. There was a scheme. Somebody was scheming. The unit of apperception, probably, and time. Without the scheme, there would just be a mess of reddishness, sock-ishness, under-ishness, bed-ishness, ness, mess, ish, mesh, ish, ich. Thanks to scheming, there is an experience, a red sock under a bed, and time. Not just a mess, although there is a mess under the bed, around the bed, and inside the unit of apperception. But at least it's an experience now, and time to get up.
Oh, Torsten, that was so great. I wish it went longer. And you've written in German as well as English, which is pretty spectacular.
Well, if you grew up in German.
Yeah, I know. But have you translated your stories from German to English?
I have translated some of my old stories, but I think they are not as good as some of the stuff that I wrote. And I'm not a translator. But...
Yeah, it's another whole skill. Yeah. Well, thank you so much for reading tonight. Thank you. D.S. Stymeist, or David Stymeist. David's debut collection, The Bone Weir, was a finalist for the Canadian Authors Association Award for Poetry. He publishes widely in both academic and literary magazines, including Canadian Literature, the Antigonish Review, Prairie Fire, The Fiddlehead. And alongside fending off Crohn's disease, he teaches creative writing, crime fiction, and Renaissance literature. What a mixture at Carleton University. He grew up as a non-Indigenous member of a mixed heritage family on Opinon Napiwin Cree Nation. These formative cultural experiences continue to guide and shape his identity. A former president of Verse Ottawa, he helped organize Verse Fest, Ottawa's International Poetry Festival, as well as manage the City of Ottawa's Poet Laureate program. Please welcome David Stymeist.
give me a second. Usually taller.
Yeah, yeah. You got it?
Yeah, yeah. That's good height.
Can we just make sure that you can still see yourself on the live stream?
Yeah, I'm not, yeah, push it that way.
Is it that way?
So, yeah, that's okay.
Okay, great.
Actually,
Thank
the
you.
light behind me is really kind of blinding, so. All right, there I am. Okay, thanks, guys. Thanks, good crowd, love it. Good readers, love the open mic. And believe me, I've been to a lot of open mics. There, some not as good as this one. Thanks to Kieran and Zoe and all the other organizers for Planet Earth Poetry, for inviting me and for running this series. It's very difficult and demanding to do that type of arts work. And for the younger generation or older generation that wants to volunteer, please think about volunteering to do some of that arts work, because it's without that energy and time and commitment, these things don't exist. Yeah. Thanks to Russell Books for hosting the event. Neat spaces, lovely space, huge, beautiful bookstore. And you know, thanks for everyone to be here to celebrate poetry. So it's nice, really nice. So I'm going to start with mass transfer, and this is a long poem that links and connects the various sections, the various clusters of the book. I actually wrote it in Crow's Nest Pass. I had a short residency there, and it was in this little cabin that was literally 50 feet away from the train tracks, and all the big freight trains, 30, you know, the 300 cars, like just, they would rumble by, and they would rumble by for, you know, 20 minutes, 25 minutes. And then I get an hour of sleep, and then another one would come by. So it kind of infected my dreams. So the sound, especially the sound, just like, you know, got permeated me. So this is a poem. Some of it's about sound. It's all a bunch of images. Don't spend a lot of time trying to work it out. There are other poems you can work out. This one's a little tricky. Mass transfer, passage 1. Steel cards ride the jolt and jive of the rails. Scattered chunks of landscape heave into view, recede in saltando, clacking beats. The plank and ping of it bangs into soles, travels the leg, runs up spine, shakes chest and chassis. Wooden ties become hash marks, score musical notation, the major minor scribing of distance, space. The jar and jump of each 39-foot length of low carbon steel, 136 heartbeats to mile end. The body, fluid, spring jointed, quivers. Below transit gear lies the understrata, subterranean underlay of ballast, subballast, subgrade, insatiate complaint of rail splitting, insect infestation, the cutting of plates, damage of lateral motion, damage to ties by abrasion of tie plate, spike pull, deep line catch fire, freighted cycles, night, day, dusk, held tight, visual calling out confined, manifested as track switching, left side, right side, bilateral hemifields. We slow, pull into patchwork swamps, reeds, cattails, copperwoods, on a concrete platform, on culvert abutment, 2 people sleep together, discrete layers, cardboard, padding, bedding, one arm flung over the other shoulder, caught in sun glare, blanched in exposure. And we'll go back a little later to another section. But I'm gonna go into this next section. It's entitled Salt, and it speaks to a loss my wife and I experienced a number of years ago. Sea jelly. My hand on my wife's navel, I imagine you floating inside. You wove Your delicate nerves formed spinal cord, brainstem, then ceased. Your heart began to ebb at the end of the third lunar. Sweet jelly, can you still press the sensitive line of mouth against your hands' gelling cells? Do you still move with the pull of moon? Feel yourself swept up in the flow of ocean. Were I gifted with insight, I would see the hidden lights, the script of constellation unfurl on the wet mirror of your skin. I'd see the Medusa's bell of Cassiopeia Andromeda drawing you up to the stars. You have fallen from your unfolding, the pleasure of elemental increase, the pleasure of stretching your limbs across firm earth's countless trails. I hope even now you sense in the dark my presence, my warmth towards you. Oblation. In the midst of our loss, can the binding and knitting of bones, the gluing of gelatinous matter, offer any chance of sea foam riding out the tide on the edge of a pink shell? Oblation. Then to you a sea throng of blue jellies blooming from the carbon dark, bluets now rising, surfacing, a sea and ocean of blue, blue on darkest blue. Let the inky layers wrap the small puddle of your existence in these blues, these deep water, hypogean blues. Chimera. Ghosting here and there within the night frost of our bedroom window, within the dead flaking bark of the elm outside, the curl of your spine, the wrinkled fist, the scrunched up face asleep, that human mask. Abrasion. Bison, venerate the rare boulders sunk deep into prairie sea. Generations spin around stone, crushing blood-sucking creatures beyond the curve of horn. Like Tibetans around a giant prayer wheel, these shaggy herds circle, rubbing contra grain of outcrop, stirring up sprays of dust, working reef stones deeper into step. How can I be more like them? Rub against roughness, learn to shed my skin. Traces. In the aftermath of loss, the attenuated, strung out nights of half sleep, the toxic, benumbing shock, wound of sea wasp. Mirrored darkly to me, the hidden smear of phosphor on my skin by the press of your forehead, that rubbing off of fish scales, an invisible smudge that burns a hole, a socket into my skull. Refracted presence, collapsed star, surest way through deep water. My chest fills with night, I drown in it. Knotted neck muscles, tissues stitched along vertebrae, spasm, twitch, release. Darkness, I've forgotten how to swim into your oblivion. Sink with the undertow, drag with your tides, sweep the depths of the antipodes. Okay, as a little palate cleanser, we're going to slide back into mass transfer, passage 2. Jumbled up sidings, coupling and uncoupling cars, transit cars, stark loops and strokes of white tagging, black tagging, orange and red tagging, spray painted Cyrillic, Arabic, German, English, on wide belly oil cars, on tubby grain cars. Women who work the Portland-Chicago Empire Line chain smoke Mary J. between the swinging cars. Resin clings to pressed uniforms, to peaked caps, raw-eyed with grief, witnessing too much of the great in-between. Broken down homesteads lean towards tracks, ghost-infested muddles of shingle, gray wood, floral wallpaper, asbestos-tainted linoleum, caught in art house mockeries, mock-ups, historical tableaus. We tunnel through crooked, winding heart of mountain, cross transcontinental divides, erupt into scabland scree and talus, gangrenous meadow, high altitude muck lake, steel flange, rolling rim wheel, torsion drags us up the dark gap, crevasse, rift canyon, Ganunga gap. Gravity dump, a broken up, roots broken down stone, tinsel shine of a tin plated wreck. One lone cow chewing on rim lip, chewing on salt weed, salt crack on crack's edge. South of Avery, irregular meadows, edging of tamarack, washed out wooden grave markers, faded Chinese Hanzi, broken remains of railroad camps where cholera leached into groundwater, peat bog swamp. Okay, so I'm going to read a few poems from Midsummer Disjunction. And this section, originally I wanted to write some poems about the experience of living with Crohn's. And I tried to write them, and I just found it's all about me. It was too egocentric, and I felt really kind of like uncomfortable in some kind of way. And gradually I found that if I could layer in more communal experiences and other types of experiences, that I could get at this material. So it is called Midsummer Disjunction. So there's these disjunctions. So the poems juxtapose living with Crohn's, life for all of us under the lockdown during COVID, and the life in my backyard garden. So there's gardening there as well. So I'll start off with number 1. Expect setbacks, lilts the medical pundit on the early morning news. Across the Ottawa River, among Les Gatinois, there's wide viral spread. Fear dilates the opening of a wound. In my garden, a 5-petal flower, yellow as butter, large as my palm. By what mysterious agency do you transform into acorn squash? Forgetful pollinator, I'll try my best not to gawk at furtive, obliging act of transfer. With this flare, my body sweats out fever, overreacts, subverts, the deep-set ache of immunological misfiring, cascades of natural killer cells and cytotoxic T cells. The open perineal gash of fistula weeps, draining the filth and flux of my bodily toxin. When will I enter that final phase and exit? 2. A cicada killer clasps a paralyzed seagull in its mandibles, drags it through the leaf litter. What horror awaits in the insect's secret crypt? Slow dissolution, the larval devouring of self. Don't bother asking a parasitic wasp about its ethics. A poet drops by for socially distant drinks, talks about his gout mainly, agony that has him crawling on his knees to the bathroom. In these times, it's easy to recall bodily pain, unnameable, burrowing, abject, suppurating wound of bowel perforation, shoved onto the floor by the force of it, screams I tried to smother. 3. I dig out lawn, gouge open a bed for a garden, half dead, haphazard grass, no great loss. Turning over the clay slick soil exposes the grubs of scarab beetles. Tiny limbs scratch at my fingertips, maxilla snap at air. My earlier attempts at biologic warfare failed. Nematodes infused into suburban underworld, parasites consuming parasites. I fling larvae, repulsive pulpy white bodies into the deserted street. An opportunistic robin on the concrete curb awaits, eager, devouring. 3 days later, the robin still trails after, hopeful with her mouth open, agape. She ropes in a mate, weaves a nest of cedar strips where the grapevines twist around the power junction. I'll go to 9. 9. Living ampersand, the long, sinuous lower case of snake curls inside my shadow, slipping low towards me. In the willow shade, it seeks out the little peepers, the chirping, fleeing peepers. 2 dead in Kenosha, a Wisconsin town I drove through 2 summers ago. On TV, mass protest, vigilante murder. When my gastroenterologist calls, I can't picture her. I listen to her disembodied voice. Her words carry the weight of absolute authority, of God. If she were here, she'd witness my fistula delta break into 8 corrosive caustic drains. Was it the Byzantine Greeks who first learned to set the ocean sea ablaze to incinerate their enemies? Yes, that's how you grind down a stone, a self. All it takes is running water, fire, and time. Okay. I'll switch to a different section. I'll read a couple from Frontier. And these are just record some of my experiences growing up on a reserve in northern Manitoba. I haven't read this one before. It'll be fun for me. Alexander. Through rustling bush, through red willow and elder, passing ghostwise through town site. Thin as a stripped wire, thin as a stripped hair, a small man, bush hermit, finding sleep on our couch. Seeing youth shimmy to each other over UB40, I slipped away. Afraid I'd turn backcountry recluse like him. He chided my cowardice, sent me back to the treaties days dance. In the after morning of black tea and fried bread, he offered meandering talk of mantic bedrock and the visitations. Years later, the old loner, hashed up, cracked up at the bottom of a crevasse, shard point of thigh bone, puncturing leg, broken and hobbled, dragging himself to lodge with the comforting reek of chainsaw oil, moose hide, cooking fat. Cut off by the malice of winter storm, not long before the frost hag slinks in, clutches him in her embrace, turns up the coils of body heat. After spring breakup, a corvid, swagger, swank perches on the ridgeline of his cabin's roof. Over the murk of beaver swamp comes its dam crowing, its crook cawing. Printmaker's vocation. Obsessed with cattle's bony shape, she drive the boundary lines until she found a herd of stock. She lured cows to the electric fence, give them sugar, sketch their haunches and raw backsides. Her tablet filled with details of slack dugs, cloven hooves, hairy, outturned ears. At times, she'd remember me, lanky teen and chill wind. She'd pull me to her, warm my body against her breast. Her wild horses won acclaim, etched with cave art vitality, ancient kinship. Yet with every praise, her face furrowed, as if these hosannas might keep her from her cows. Berry picking. When the moon of small engine repair hung low, we gathered berries, passing territorial thickets, solar lands, jealously held clan inheritances. Hiking through bleached spines, dead trunks, pushing through moss, we entered the swath of old burn. There's good harvest where the bear shit lies. We made a racket, rifles near at hand. Twigs, thorns caught at sunburnt skin. Blood bubbled up along the lines of scratches, pails filled. We left the scrublands, lips, fingers stained blue-black, smeared with the nectar of sun, easy to forget yourself with mouth open to the taste of wild fruit. I think that's experience. Many of you have gone berry picking. Leighton has a berry picking poem. It's not like that. It's mainly about his wife. Leighton, what can you do with the man? Okay, I'm going to finish up with I'll do I guess 3 more poems, and they're from this section called Chronologies, and it just it kind of celebrates and explores some of the experiences I've had with my daughter. And well, I'll start with the one that I actually wrote after a visit to Victoria many years ago. Keepstone. Years later, at Clover Point, ocean laps sand, and my daughter plays, harpy strands snapping at the wind. Legs wet to the knee, silt encrusted. Kneeling, she sculpts a driftwood city, builds a defense drawn tight against the marine raids of trolls and witches. As we beachcomb, I collect the discarded needles of junkies, traces of nocturnal smack-ups. She follows, clutching green sea glass, polished by the grinding surf. I ended up with a baggie full of needles. And it's like looking around town for a needle drop. It was a thing. I did find one. Okay, waiting with my daughter at the clinic. Within the burbling tank, sympatric species form mutualistic drifts. Neon tetra, delta guppy. Their ancestors once rode streams of Colombian black water. Now these aquarians take this alien habitat of submarine fantasia as their home. Treasure chest, bleach coral, dive suits, life-size skulls, barks of bones. The little fish flee the grasping fingers of my child, who gropes after their thin streaks of azure, indigo, gold. I'll do 2 more. Do Last Dance. Okay. Last Dance at the museum, and this was after a trip to the ROM in Toronto. So I don't know if you've been. Fantastic place. The mastodon grins at us with the ferocity of a ballroom dancer. Frankly, the giant smile unnerves. It's caught a punchline that's passed us by, a wisecrack tongued in a lost language. Ancient Greeks believed these big bones, the cursed remains of titanic Cyclops, Neptune's brood fallen on ill luck. Subarctic hunters share stranger tales of gigantic mole creatures who tunnel in earth, broke in the catalyst of open air and solar beam. Was this ragged beast the American enigma that eluded the guns of Lewis and Clark, sent west by Jefferson to bring back fabled megafauna? In a future warehouse of the ancient, our tribes, android spawn, will display our bones beside these bones. We will join it on the raised scaffold to let other forms of sentience marvel, and maybe then we will laugh together. Divers at the community pool. We wait our turn, slouching in shade. The pair ahead, poised to spring into the air. They could be brother and sister. They could be young lovers, each at the end of twin diving boards. Linked in age and fitness of body and shameless pride, male and female matched. All I know is their pairing is secret and uncanny, not lingering for the awkward moment. No, to a quiet synchronicity. They spring into the air, matched in somersault. They spring free of the world, free of gravity, free of all that weighs the human body down. Their feet reach apex, and then with a sweet twist of hip, they plunge Feet first. Those feet arcing down touch the transparent blue as if they had every right to walk its surface. Their bodies disappear in a white explosion of water. They disappear into nothing. When they pop to the surface, the divers slide to pool's edge to begin their choreography anew. How many other things can they do with such timing? Do they do everything this way? My timing has never been perfect, especially now that disease nibbles at the edges of my existence. You know, I don't think they know what they're doing, but I know. I can see it right in front of me. Okay.